Max Hartwell's breath fogged the small porthole of the escape pod as he hurtled towards the unknown planet below. The lights on the control panel flickered sporadically, echoing his erratic heartbeat. He was a fugitive, an escapee from the notorious interstellar penitentiary, Orbis 5. Freedom was within grasp, albeit plummeting through the atmosphere of a planet not charted on any star map. The pod shook violently, a rough descent through the planet's thick, turbulent atmosphere. Max gripped the sides of his seat, his knuckles white, as the small vessel screamed through the alien sky. He braced for impact, the ground rushing up to meet him in a blur of green and brown. With a bone-jarring thud, the pod smashed into the jungle floor. The force of the landing whipped Max forward, his head smacking against the control panel. Darkness crept at the edges of his vision, and then everything went black. When he came to, the world was a haze of pain and disorientation. The escape pod, now a crumpled heap of metal, had saved his life, but just barely. Max groaned, feeling a sharp sting across his forehead, wet and warm with blood. Pushing against the pain, he unfastened his safety harness and staggered out into the alien jungle. The air was thick and humid, filled with the cries of unseen creatures and the rustle of gigantic leaves. Max knew he needed to move. Staying by the wreckage was a death sentence if the prison guards or their drones were on his trail. With effort, he pushed through the underbrush, the foliage heavy with moisture and alien life that watched with unseen eyes. As night began to fall, the jungle transformed. Bioluminescent plants cast an eerie glow, illuminating the dense undergrowth in shades of blue and green. Max stumbled through this alien nightscape, driven by the primal fear of what might be lurking in the shadows. Suddenly, a rustle to his right, something big. Max froze, his heart pounding in his ears. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall and imposing, with skin that shimmered like the stars themselves. It was a woman, or at least, her form suggested as much, though her features were distinctly non-human. Her eyes glowed faintly under her brow, and she regarded him with an intensity that made him shiver. Max took a step back, his hand instinctively reaching for a weapon he no longer had. The woman tilted her head, observing him with a curious gaze that seemed to pierce right through him. "Who are you?" Max managed to croak out, his voice hoarse from disuse. The alien woman responded, but her language was melodic and unfamiliar, a series of clicks and tones that he couldn't begin to understand. Yet, her voice had a calming effect, and Max felt his initial fear ebb away slightly. Seeing his confusion, she spoke again, this time the device at her throat glowing slightly as her words translated into a rough approximation of his language. "I am Ariel of the Tsuna. You are not from here. Why have you come?" Max weighed his options. Trust was a luxury he couldn't afford, but neither was alienation in this unknown world. "I'm Max. I escaped. I'm just looking for a place to hide, to start over." Ariel considered his words, her gaze never leaving his face. "You run from your past, but you cannot outrun yourself. Come, I will take you to my village. You need healing, and it is not safe here after dark." Reluctantly, and without much choice, Max followed her deeper into the jungle, towards an uncertain future among the stars. As they walked, the sounds of the jungle filled the air, a reminder that on this planet, he was the alien, and survival would mean adapting to a world far more complex than the prison he had left behind. The journey to Ariel's village was fraught with unseen dangers. Max followed closely behind her, his senses on high alert. Every rustle in the undergrowth seemed to hint at predatory creatures just beyond sight. Ariel moved with a grace and silence that spoke of a deep familiarity with her environment, her steps barely disturbing the leaf-strewn floor. As they approached the village, the dense jungle opened up to reveal a series of structures that appeared to grow organically from the ground itself. The buildings were constructed from materials that mimicked the surrounding foliage, blending seamlessly into the jungle. The village was alive with the sounds of the Tsuna people, their voices blending with the natural sounds of the jungle in a harmonious cacophony. Max was met with curious stares as he entered the village. Children peeked from behind woven partitions, and adults paused in their tasks to observe the newcomer. Ariel spoke to her people in their flowing language, her hands gesturing towards Max, likely explaining his presence. She led him to what appeared to be a healing center, a spacious hut filled with the aroma of alien herbs and the gentle hum of advanced medical devices. A healer, marked by intricate body paintings, approached and examined Max's wounds with efficient movements. The healer applied a salve that tingled on his skin, knitting the flesh together in a way that seemed almost magical to Max. Later, Ariel invited Max to a communal meal. The food was strange, with textures and flavors that were completely foreign to him, but hunger drove him to eat with a fervor he hadn't realized he possessed. As they ate, Ariel explained more about her people and their world. "The Tsuna have lived in harmony with Tehran for generations," she said, referring to the planet with a term that meant mother root in her tongue. "We understand the balance of life here, the give and take. But our world changes. We face threats from within and beyond our skies." Intrigued, Max asked about these threats, and Ariel's face grew somber. "There are others who seek to exploit Tehran for its resources. We resist, but it's becoming more difficult. Your arrival might not be a coincidence. New bonds could fortify our position." Max considered her words. Back in the penal colony, alliances were about survival, and it seemed the same rules applied here. "I may not be much help," he confessed, "but I'll do what I can. Maybe together we can find a way to protect your home." Ariel nodded, her eyes reflecting a mix of determination and gratitude. "Tonight you rest. Tomorrow we will see what the future holds." As Max settled into a shelter for the night, his mind raced with the possibilities of his new life. Here, under the alien stars, he could redefine himself. He could help the Tsuna, and maybe, just maybe, he could find redemption among the stars. The sound of the jungle lulled him into a fitful sleep, where visions of his past mingled with the alien world around him. Morning in the Tsuna village began with the bright chorus of the jungle's dawn. Max awoke to find Ariel waiting for him outside his shelter, her expression serious. "Today we need your help," she stated simply, gesturing for him to follow. They walked towards the edge of the village, where the foliage thickened into an almost impenetrable wall of green. Ariel paused before a concealed entrance, barely visible under the draping leaves. "This is one of our sacred places, but it has been threatened by outsiders. We believe something valuable to them was left behind, something they will return for." Max followed her into the darkness of the cavern. The air was cool and damp, filled with the musty scent of earth. As they ventured deeper, the natural light faded until they were enveloped in darkness. Ariel clicked a device on her wrist, and soft blue light illuminated the cavern walls, revealing ancient carvings and symbols that told the history of the Tsuna. They reached a chamber where the ground was disturbed. Scattered around were the remnants of a technological device, alien even to Ariel's people. "They were searching for this," she explained, pointing to a metallic object half buried in the soil. "It's part of a weapon, old and very dangerous." Max crouched beside the object, examining it. "Looks military grade. Could be Terran," he murmured, thinking back to his days before the prison, when he'd seen similar tech in the hands of mercenaries. "This isn't just scavenging, it's a planned operation." Ariel nodded, her face grim. "We've seen drones, small ones, scouting the area. They haven't found this cave yet, but it's only a matter of time." The implications were clear. Whoever was behind this wasn't going to give up easily. Max stood, determination settling in. "We need to secure this place, maybe set up defenses, and you'll need to be prepared for when they come back." Back at the village, Max shared his knowledge of security systems and traps. With the help of the Tsuna, they began to fortify the area. Using a combination of the planet's natural resources and salvaged technology from the escape pod, they set up a network of sensors and traps around the village and the sacred cave. As they worked, Max taught Ariel how to interpret the sensor data. "It's not just about knowing they're coming," he explained. "It's about understanding where and how. That gives you the advantage." The days blended into one another as they prepared. Max found himself growing closer to the Tsuna, learning their ways and sharing his own experiences. The fear of being found by his former captors was always in the back of his mind. But here, with Ariel and her people, he found a sense of purpose he hadn't realized he'd been searching for. One evening, as they reviewed the sensor logs, Ariel looked up at him, her expression thoughtful. "You've changed since you arrived," she observed. "You're part of this world now." Max smiled, a genuine warmth spreading through him. "I guess I am," he agreed, "and I'll do whatever it takes to defend it." In the deepening twilight, as the sounds of the jungle rose around them, Max felt a resolve strengthen within him. This was his fight now, not just for survival, but for a home. In the cool of early morning, Max and Ariel patrolled the perimeter they had fortified. Their efforts had transformed the landscape into a defensive stronghold, complete with camouflaged pitfalls and silent alarms woven into the very vegetation. As they walked, a soft chirping sound interrupted the morning calm, the signal from one of the sensors. Max tapped the device strapped to his wrist, pulling up the sensor data. "Movement to the west, approaching fast. Could be them," he said, his voice low. Ariel nodded, signaling to a group of Tsuna warriors who materialized seemingly from nowhere, their presence barely noticeable even to Max's trained eyes. They moved with a swift, silent coordination, heading towards the source of the alert. Max and Ariel took position behind a thick trunk, camouflaged by the dense foliage. The minutes stretched into tense silence, punctuated only by the distant calls of the jungle's inhabitants. Suddenly the quiet was shattered by the whir of drones, slicing through the air with mechanical precision. Max peered through a handheld viewer, counting. 4 drones, armed. Ariel's expression hardened. "They're probing our defenses. Testing." Max watched as one of the drones hovered near a sensor, its scanning beam sweeping the area. He held his breath, hoping their camouflage would hold. The drone paused, its beam lingering on their hiding spot for a heartbeat too long before it moved on. "They didn't detect us. Our tech's holding up," Max whispered, a hint of relief in his tone. The drones continued their patrol, unaware of the Tsuna warriors converging silently on their position from all sides. With a swift, coordinated strike, the warriors used handheld EMP devices to disable the drones, which fell from the sky like broken birds. Gathering the disabled drones, the group quickly retreated to the village, where Max and Ariel examined the wreckage. "These drones are scout class, lightweight and not built for combat. This means they're still in the early stages of their operation," Max assessed. Ariel looked towards the horizon, her eyes narrowing. "They will send more, stronger ones next time." Max nodded in agreement. "We need to up our game. I can rig these drones to work for us, turn their technology against them." Over the next few days, Max worked tirelessly, repurposing the drone technology to enhance their defenses. He equipped the Tsuna warriors with adapted drones, now programmed to patrol autonomously around the village's perimeter. As they prepared for what they knew would be a more severe confrontation, Max trained the Tsuna in the use of this new technology. The warriors, quick learners and highly adaptable, grasped the concepts with a surprising swiftness, their natural agility and understanding of their environment giving them an edge in utilizing the drones effectively. Amidst the preparation, a deeper bond formed between Max and the Tsuna, forged in the fires of impending conflict. Ariel, in particular, seemed to find a kindred spirit in Max. "Your knowledge has given us hope," she told him one evening as they looked out over the village, the repurposed drones flitting silently between the trees. Max felt a twinge of pride, mixed with a poignant realization. "This place, it's worth fighting for," he said, his gaze lingering on the faces of those he was helping to defend. The sky darkened as the first signs of dusk mingled with the mechanical hum of their new sentinels. Max knew the real test was yet to come, and as he stood beside Ariel, watching the night take hold, he understood that the battle to protect this alien home was just beginning. The night was punctuated by the rhythmic patrolling of the repurposed drones, their red lights blinking through the darkness like the heartbeat of the village. Max, standing watch at the command center they had established, monitored the incoming feeds from the sensors and drones with vigilant eyes. A sharp ping from the console broke the silence, a warning of multiple fast-approaching objects from the north. "Contact! Looks like they're coming in heavy this time," Max announced, his voice cutting through the stillness of the night. Ariel, who had been coordinating the village's defenses, moved beside him to assess the situation. The screen displayed rapid movement, too coordinated and too direct to be anything but an attack. "Get everyone to their stations. This is it," she commanded, her tone both calm and resolute. As the villagers scrambled to defensive positions, the first wave of enemy drones swooped in, larger and more heavily armed than those they had encountered before. Max had rigged several of the captured drones with explosives, a makeshift but effective countermeasure. He remotely piloted one, steering it directly into the path of the incoming wave. The explosion lit up the night sky, taking out several enemy drones, but more pressed on toward the village. Max and the Tsuna fighters responded with a barrage of EMP blasts, successfully disabling a few, but the attackers adapted quickly, changing their formation to minimize damage. "Their tactics are evolving. They're learning from each encounter," Max observed, adjusting his strategy on the fly. He switched to manual control for a drone, diving it into the thick of the enemy swarm with precise maneuvers that spoke of his years of piloting experience. Meanwhile, Ariel led a group on the ground, moving stealthily through the underbrush to flank the enemy's ground forces. The Tsuna's knowledge of the terrain gave them an undeniable advantage, allowing them to ambush and neutralize several ground units with traps and hand-to-hand combat techniques. The battle raged through the night, the sounds of conflict echoing against the serene backdrop of the jungle. Max and Ariel worked seamlessly, their commands overlapping and interweaving as they directed their people and the village's defenses against the onslaught. As dawn approached, the tide of the battle began to shift. The enemy's numbers dwindled, their attacks less coordinated as they started to retreat. Max took advantage of the lull, sending out drones to harry the retreating forces, ensuring they wouldn't regroup easily. "We pushed them back," Ariel said, her face illuminated by the light of the early dawn, tired but triumphant. Max nodded, his eyes still on the monitors, watching for any signs of a second wave. "They'll be back, though, with more." "Yes, but now we know we can hold them off. And we will again," Ariel responded, her gaze fierce and determined. The villagers emerged from their shelters, surveying the damage and tending to the wounded. The battle had left scars on the land and its people, but it had also pulled them together, strengthening their resolve. In the aftermath, Max walked through the village, helping to repair a drone here, a defense post there. The gratitude of the Tsuna was palpable, their respect for him evident in their nods and quiet thanks. Ariel joined him as he worked, her presence a silent assertion of their shared commitment. "Today we survived," she said softly. "And tomorrow we thrive," Max added, looking around at the rebuilding efforts. Together they turned to face the new day, ready for whatever challenges it might bring, united in their defense of a world that had become his sanctuary and her legacy. The village had scarcely a moment's peace before the next threat loomed on the horizon. Max, ever vigilant, noticed an anomaly in the sensor readings early one morning. "Increased thermal signatures, about 2 clicks northeast of here," he reported to Ariel, who had become his steadfast partner in this relentless defense. "This is different," she observed, examining the data. "They're not advancing. It looks like they're setting up a base." The implication was clear. The enemy intended a prolonged siege or a staging ground for continual assaults. This was no longer about scattered attacks. It was an occupation, an attempt to claim Tehran. Gathering the village leaders and their newfound allies, Max proposed a bold plan. "If they're digging in, they're planning something big. We can't wait them out. We strike at their base, take out their command center. It's now or never." Ariel supported the initiative, her eyes scanning the room, meeting the gazes of her people with a silent promise of protection. The plan was set, and the village began preparations for what could be their final confrontation. Under the cover of night, Max led a small strike team through the jungle, their movements a whisper against the chorus of nocturnal life. They approached the enemy base, a makeshift compound fortified with advanced tech and heavy weaponry. EMP charges here, here, and here, Max directed, pointing to the power generators that hummed with a soft, menacing glow. The team split up, each member moving with purpose, driven by the stakes of their mission. With all charges in place, Max gave the signal. The night erupted in bursts of electric blue as the EMPs discharged, plunging the base into darkness. The sudden blackout was their cue. Max and the Tsuna warriors surged forward, exploiting the confusion. The enemy, though disoriented, was quick to rally. A fierce battle ensued, blaster fire crisscrossing the darkened field. Max found himself face to face with the enemy commander, a grizzled veteran whose eyes burned with a ruthless determination. Words were unnecessary. Their conflict was immediate and brutal. Max's combat skills, honed both in and out of prison, were tested as he parried, dodged, and struck with lethal precision. The duel was a dance of death, each participant acutely aware that only one would leave the battlefield. With a final desperate maneuver, Max disarmed his opponent, the commander's weapon clattering to the ground. Breathing heavily, he held his position, ready for any trickery. But the commander simply nodded, a gesture of respect among warriors. "You've won for now," he grunted, his voice grudgingly admiring. Max's team rounded up the remaining forces, securing the base. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, it illuminated a scene of victory, but also of profound responsibility. Returning to the village, Max and Ariel were greeted as heroes, but the celebration was tempered with the knowledge that peace might be temporary. They needed to be vigilant, prepared for any future threats. In the following days, Max worked with the Tsuna to establish a permanent defense system, using salvaged enemy tech and their indigenous knowledge. Ariel, true to her word, ensured that their strategies were sustainable, preserving the balance of their world. As peace settled over Tehran, Max found himself reflecting on his journey. What had started as a desperate flight for freedom had transformed into a fierce fight for a new home, a home worth defending alongside allies who had become his family. Standing beside Ariel, watching the sun rise over a world no longer under siege, Max felt a contentment he'd never known. "Together, we've built something lasting," he said, his voice filled with hope. Ariel smiled, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "Yes, and together, we will keep it safe." As the new day dawned on Tehran, the jungle alive with the promise of a peaceful future, Max no longer saw himself as an escapee, but as a guardian of this alien paradise. Here among the stars, he had found his purpose, his redemption, and perhaps his destiny.